Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told I had a voice for radio, but today we are coming back with round 3 from the Nottingham League Challenge. We've already seen rounds 1 and 2 featuring some very good players. One of them is back. He is Luke Kirkham. He is going to be playing his Rayquaza deck again, like we saw him, I believe, back in round 1. And we got a new player in the stream this round, Pham, and he is the current Dutch national champion. He went and won Dutch Nationals a couple of weeks ago, and he is basically in the UK at this tournament trying to cement his place in the top 22. That's the top 22 players in Europe who get a paid invite to the World Championships, flight and accommodation paid for, as well as an automatic entry into Day 2, rather than having to go into Day 1 with the riffraff. So two very good players who both already have their World's invite absolutely sewn up. One who's going for top 22, playing very good decks. So sit back and enjoy the round. So Luke is going to roll the dice here, and he wins a flip, I believe, and Luke has elected to go first, as you would in this format. Now Rayquaza does have a cool little thing, of course, where you can get going on the very first turn of the game. But it, you know, if you can hit a Mega Turbo and a DCE and the Rayquaza and the Spirit Link and the Mega Rayquaza, but let's face it, ladies and gentlemen, it's a lot to pull off in one turn. Much easier to have the 2 turns. Plus, Luke knows that Benji is playing a deck that's got Hawlucha and Landorus, so it's got some potential turn 1 attackers there. Speaking of potential turn 1 attackers, there is Hawlucha, and Luke needs to get that Shaman out of the active as he plays a Trainer's Mail. The reason is Hawlucha does 60 damage to an EX for 1 fighting energy, and that goes through weakness and resistance. Shaman, of course, being resistant and having 110 HP. What that means is that he's already doing 60 to the Shaman. With a strong energy, he'll do 80. With a muscle band, he'll do 100. And with a fighting stadium, along with strong energy and muscle band, he will actually be doing a whopping 120 damage, which of course will be enough to get a 1-hit KO on the Shaman for 2 prizes on the very first turn of the game. Now, we've already seen Luke appear on the stream once, so I urge you to go back and have a look at that game in advance of this. We looked at Luke's deck in a lot of detail, so we are going to look at Benji's kind of as we go here. So Luke, he's got the Shaman with a DCE, and he's got very, very little indeed. The challenge for Benji here now is, does he go all out, and he plays an N there, does he go all out to try and get the KO, or does he just play it conservatively and try and set up? Now, we saw that he had a normal fighting energy in his hand. He didn't attach that. That will come back to bite him if he draws no energy here from his end to 6. So I think that's, hopefully for Benji's sake anyway, unlikely. You don't want to whiff an energy attachment. But of course, Shaman's got Sky Return, so if he doesn't KO the Shaman, next turn Luke can do Sky Return for 30 and put the Shaman and all cards attached to it back into his hand, and it will be as if Benji never actually got the damage done. So we see an Ultra Ball coming down there, and presumably this will be for his Shaman, because we can see he's got the Fighting Stadium in his hand, and there he goes for the Shaman. If he can draw enough cards here and get the strong energy, he's going to win on the very first turn of the game. Not only is he going to get the KO on the Shaman, but he's actually going to be able to KO the Shaman as Luke's lone Pokemon and come out with a win. So there goes the Fighting Stadium, and it looks like he's going to Shaman for 4 cards. Shaman, remember, has his setup ability that allows you to draw until you've got 6. There goes the strong energy, and just like that, on the first turn of the game, Benji has managed to donk Luke's only Shaman, and ladies and gentlemen, we have a win. So Benji goes up 1-0, and that's very interesting for Benji, because now he's only got to win 1 more, and they've got 2 chances to do it. Now, actually, while we're between games, I should thank the lovely folks at Chimera Nottingham. I've popped their logo on the splash page for this particular video. And specifically to Becca, Amanda, and Andy. Andy being the TO shop owner, Becca being the head judge at this particular tournament. Although I don't know exactly who was the TO. It doesn't really matter. They are the lovely people who both set up and ran this tournament for all of us and allowed me to set up a camera to record some of these games to share with you lovely people. So cheers to Andy and to Becca. Very, very much appreciated on our part. So Benji's 1 game up here. We're in a best of 3, it's 15 minutes, but because Luke had a very short turn and Benji didn't exactly have a particularly long turn, we could even get 2 games here. We could see an actual legitimate best of 3. Now, if this goes the distance, I would put Luke at a slight advantage here, but it is slight. Benji basically is playing Hawlucha, and we saw his attack a moment ago. He's playing Landorus, which does 30 to the active, 30 to the bench for 1 fighting energy. And then you can add to that with your strong energy and your muscle band and your fighting stadium, etc. And he's playing Bats. Crobat, you evolve and put 2 damage counters anywhere. And Golbat, sorry, and for Crobat, you evolve and put 3 damage counters onto one of your opponent's Pokemon. And it's a way of kind of spreading around extra damage, and that's what Benji's deck really relies upon. You're trying to spread a bit of damage with Landorus, hitting the bench for 30, as well as spreading damage with the Crobats and Golbats, and then, of course, you've got the Hawlucha to come in to do other attacks on EXs, and that basically is what the entire game comes down to for Benji. Spreading damage around. It's not the easiest deck to play, because you've got to be very careful in terms of what damage you put where. Just making sure that you can kind of get the KOs. So, once again, Benji starts with a Hawlucha. Luke has a better start here. He's got a Virizion in the active. He attaches a Grass Energy. What that's going to allow him to do is retreat the next turn, because Virizion's got a retreat cost of 1. And then he's actually going to be able to use Mega Turbo to attach the Grass Energy to a Rayquaza. There's no way you can attack this turn, because it's his first turn of the game, and you can't attack on the first turn, except for a few things like Deoxys and Latios, which specifically say that they can. So Luke really doesn't need to attack this turn. He knows that Virizion can't be KO'd by anything Benji's got on the first turn of the game. Benji physically can't do enough damage. I think 120 is the maximum he can do, and he can't get any Golbats or Crobats down. And even if he used Wally to evolve into Golbat, you only get the damage done if you evolve from your hand, not from a Wally. So, yeah. The Virizion's safe. Luke knows he just wants to retreat it, and then he wants to get his Rayquaza going next turn. So by putting the energy on there, it's a really, really good thing for him to do. Next turn, he's going to need a Mega Turbo and a DCE, and he's ready to rock. And it looks like he's just ended his turn. Remember, Rayquaza, the Mega, has Delta Evolution, which allows you to evolve whenever you want. The turn it's put down, first turn of the game, etc. But, of course, that does end your turn unless you've got a Spirit Link. Luke wasn't able to find a Spirit Link, but it's not the end of the world. Now, Benji has gotten a Focus Sash down there on the Hawlucha. And that is pretty critical, to be honest, because that Focus Sash basically says if you would be one-hit KO'd, discard the Focus Sash, and you've got 10 HP left. Now, a lot of Rayquaza decks don't actually play any Startling Megaphone. So that's going to present an issue if Luke can't... I mean, Luke doesn't want to be 2-hit KOing a Hawlucha with something like a Rayquaza. That ain't going to fly. What Luke needs to be doing is getting a KO on essentially the EXs for one... You know, he wants to be one-hit KO in the EXs. He wants to be able to do one attack to KO the EXs, the Landorus. That's what Luke wants to be going for. The Golbats and Crobats, I mean, Luke can KO them. But the thing is that they aren't really doing all that much. They add up over time, but it takes a while. The annoying thing for Luke is those Hawluchas that can be one-hit KOing Shaymins, 2-hit KOing Rayquazas, Virizions, etc. And if you've got a Focus Sash down, or if Benji's got a Focus Sash down, and they get 2-hit KO'd themselves, that is going to be very, very difficult for Luke to win the prize trade here. So here comes a Professor's Letter from Benji. He's getting, shockingly, a couple of fighting energy. What else would you get with Professor's Letter when you're only playing basic fighting energy? Now that Hawlucha is currently hitting for 80 damage. That's going to mean that Virizion's then going to have 90 HP left, which is essentially 2 Crobats and a Landorus. Or maybe, for instance, 2 Golbats, a Crobat and a Landorus. So the thing that Benji's going to be looking for here is, even though he can't one-hit KO the Virizion, Luke, judging by most Rayquaza decks, he's not likely to be playing Super Scoop Up or anything of that nature. So even if that Virizion retreats to the bench as we expect it to, through Golbats, Crobats, and the residual damage from Landorus's Hammerhead attack, that Virizion can be KO'd during this game by Benji. So it's not the end of the world. And here we go. It's exactly like we thought it might be. He plays the Mega Turbo to get the grass energy on the Rayquaza. He gets a Swablu down. Swablu's not going to do much. It just gets rid of weakness of colorless Pokemon. And, Luke's colorless Pokemon are weak to Lightning. Benji doesn't play Lightning. What it does do is get another Pokemon down on the bench. And remember that Rayquaza does 30 damage times the number of bench Pokemon. Worst case scenario, we get the Swablu comes down and straight into the Altaria. And there's a Trainer's Mail from Luke. Worst case scenario, the Skyfield gets knocked off the board. Already has got the Startling Megaphone off the Trainer's Mail. That is a wonderful thing for Luke there, assuming, of course, he has the DCE to use to attack. That would then knock all of Benji's energy off the board, leaving him with just a Shaman and a Zubat, which would make a big, big deal. So there comes the Startling Megaphone. He must have the DCE, or at least believe he's going to be able to get it from other cards, burn some cards, play another Shaman, etc. So he plays another Trainer's Mail here, and he's really digging for this DCE. If he hits the DCE, he is very much in the driver's seat. The other thing is, we talk about Benji and the fact that he can get these bench KOs. Oh, there's a Spirit Link. He can get the bench KOs, and he can, one-hit KO the Shamans. The fact of the matter is, Benji's deck has very little answer for the Mega Rayquaza, which is why I would put, and there comes a Shaman, as I've said, he needs to dig for the DCE, so that's what he's going to be doing. Landorus Spats does struggle with the actual Mega Rayquaza. Now, there is a possibility that Benji just plays Lysandre 3 turns in a row and KOs, a Shaman, a Virizion, and another Shaman, and then never actually goes about killing the Rayquaza. But it takes a lot just to get a 2-hit KO with the Hawlucha. Hawlucha would need a Strong Energy Muscle Band Fighting Stadium just a 2-hit KO, and you would need that twice. So it takes a lot to take it down. And you don't have to take down the Rayquaza. Benji can just focus on the bench Pokemon and kill the bench Pokemon instead. The problem with that approach, of course, is if you don't kill the Rayquaza stays out, which means that Luke is getting a KO every single turn, and then when he hits Lysandre, he's taking 2 prizes. So Luke's basically taking out, in that scenario, Luke will be taking out Benji's attackers while Benji takes out support Pokemon on the bench. And when that happens, the person taking out the support Pokemon generally ends up losing the game because they run out of steam, while the person who's keeping the Pokemon they want active are doing just fine. So he plays a Jirachi down just to fill up his bench a little bit. And then there comes a Shaman for 4 or 5. And then we get a Mr. Mime down. He's actually, I think, filled his bench here. I think he's got 8 Pokemon. Remember, Luke's got that Skyfield Stadium out. That allows both players to have up to 8 benched Pokemon in play. 8 bench Pokemon on their bench. So it looks like he has got 8 bench Pokemon. So he's playing a Battle Compressor just to fin his deck a little bit. He's getting rid of a Grass Energy, which he can then, of course, Mega Turbo back onto a Mega Rayquaza. And he's going to, if there are any other cards he doesn't want to draw, that's what he would play the Battle Compressor for. Getting rid of, other Battle Compressors that he's not going to need, or useless Pokemon. If he hadn't played them down, the Altarias would be a good one to go for, or the Swablu Altaria. And he has got the DCE. We just saw him put that down. He gets the KO on the Hawlucha, so a monumental turn there from Luke, not just in terms of advancing his own board position, but in terms of how many things he did and how bloomin' long that took. That is a format we're in with Shaman, ladies and gentlemen. It takes an awfully long time to do very little. All he did was KO a 70 HP Pokemon. So down comes a Corinna, and Benji is now in a lot of trouble in this game, a huge amount of trouble. And the reason is that Rayquaza isn't going anywhere. That Rayquaza is currently hitting for 240 damage. 8 bench Pokemon times 30 damage is 240. And even if Benji plays a Fighting Stadium to get rid of the Skyfield, Luke would then discard 3 bench Pokemon going down to the regular 5 and still be hitting 150 damage. That KOs anything but a Landorus, a Skyfield, and any other Pokemon, and Luke would be getting the KO. So it's going to be a very difficult road here for Benji to get a win in this game. It's already looking pretty bad for him. One thing I should point out is that Luke didn't play Battle Compressor for the Execute that turn. So, and I know he does play Execute, so I don't know whether the Execute's prized or whether it's already in the discard, but that would obviously be a prime candidate for Battle Compressor, because we like having the Execute in the discard pile because it's got the propagation ability. It allows you to just take it from the discard pile, put it in your hand. It helps you to manage the discards of Ultra Ball, so you can just discard the Execute, so you've got to discard less from your hand, but it also allows you to do things like always have an extra bench Pokemon handy. And given that most EXs you need to do 180 damage, if you've got 6 Pokemon down, or 7 or 8, and your opponent gets rid of your Skyfield, you go down to 5. You then play a second Skyfield, you need a 6th Pokemon, and the Execute is in your discard pile ready to go. So Benji here, he just played a Shaman for a lot of cards, and he's still going. He is just played an Ultra Ball to get himself a Golbat. He's going to be able to do 20 damage somewhere on the field with this. Now, in most games here, you would just be after the Virizion. But of course, you can't just go for the Virizion. As I've said, you need to get that Rayquaza. So what Benji needs to do here is just focus on that Rayquaza. He's going to lose a couple of prizes while he does it, but it's not the end of the world. In theory, if he can just take down one Rayquaza, he can then have one Lysandre for a Virizion, one Lysandre for a Shaman, and then win the game. So, possible here. Now, we see Benji wasn't able to get the Fighting Stadium. Oh, and here comes Lysandre for Shaman, so Luke's going to get 2 prizes here. I'm not 100% sure I would have done that. I probably would have just killed the Hawlucha there, because you can Lysandre up the Shaman and kill it at any point. You want to run Benji out of stuff here, and Benji, he's only got so many Hawluchas, and Hawlucha in this matchup really is his best attacker. So he can now put a second Fighting Energy on the Hawlucha, so he's hitting for 100. And he's going to need a Fighting Stadium Crobat for the KO here. It's going to take quite a bit. Now, or maybe even just the Fighting Stadium, actually. Regardless, he's not actually got anything going yet, which is a shame. Hopefully he will get something going in the very near future. He needs to add a bit of damage there. Now, interestingly here, he's actually put a Muscle Band on the Crobat. Now, he might just be doing that to try and, waste some cards. But he might be doing it because he's actually getting ready to attack. It would be very interesting if that's the tact he went for, if that's the solution he found here. So it is 220 HP for Mega Rayquaza. It's easy to get confused with the Megas. So he needs to do 120 damage, does Benji. So here, he's going to really need a Fighting Stadium or a Crobat. He's gone Super Scoop up, presumably. He's probably going for the Shaman there to get some more cards. If he's got a Fighting Stadium or he's got a Crobat, he gets the KO here. Oh, and he's got a Heads, and there he does go for the Shaman. Now, the other thing to remember is, even if he doesn't get the KO here, he can just Crobat next turn for the KO. But the problem is, Luke just needs to KO one Hawlucha, and then it's Lysandre for game. Now, personally, I would have not Lysandre'd last turn. Oh, so he's got the Crobat, and now here comes a Hawlucha to get the KO, and he's going to be doing a total of... Yeah, that's a lot of damage. I would like to have seen him KO the Hawlucha last turn so that couldn't happen. But bearing that in mind, it's still not particularly the end of the world, because it's easy enough, and you see there, he's got a Grass Energy, he's got a Mega Turbo, he's got another Rayquaza going here. So it's really, it's not a big deal for Luke to actually get the KO on this Hawlucha. Now what he really needs, Luke, is to try and set himself up to have a Lysandre next turn. Oh, he does have the Execute, so he didn't Battle Compressor it earlier, but he goes to Battle Compressor it now. And essentially here, he's going to knock out the Hawlucha, and there's no way that Benji is going to KO that Rayquaza. Not in one turn. Although, we've got the Focus Sash down, of course. So Luke doesn't want to be going after that Hawlucha. That's very, very interesting indeed. what would be brilliant, and he doesn't get, and there's nothing else he can do. That's the power of Focus Sash. What would have been a fun little play, and it wasn't possible without a DCE, what I would like to have seen Luke do there is actually attack with the Shaman to do Sky Return for 30, and then put the Mr. Mime, not the Mr. Mime, sorry, something like the Altaria active, and then make Benji take down that before getting their KO with a Rayquaza, rather than now having to leave the Rayquaza active. Having said that, it's still not a particularly bad position for Luke here. Luke is still in by far the stronger position here. Benji can do 100 damage here, maybe a maximum of one. To be fair, he could get up to 160 here. And he Lysandre's for the Virizion. Oh, and now things are getting interesting. Here he's doing 100. He's going to get the KO on the Virizion. And now Benji needs Hawlucha, and he needs him fast. Benji needs to get a third Hawlucha down, and then he needs another Lysandre, and he needs to go after that Shaman next turn. It's asking a lot, but that Focus Sash has bought him at least one more turn. Now here comes the Golbat, and it's got to be on a Shaman, or, excuse me, the Jirachi. Of course the Jirachi. I meant to say Jirachi. He's got less HP. The other thing Benji wants to do here is not put down a Fighting Stadium. Because if he puts down a Fighting Stadium, that's going to force Luke to discard some bench Pokemon, and he can then discard the Jirachi and stop, essentially, the win condition here. Now, what Benji's going to try and do here is get the KO on the Jirachi with or without a Lysandre. Now, it's got 70 HP left, and he can't get the KO next turn unless he draws a Lysandre. So, what would be nice is if he could... I mean, I'd quite like to see him put an energy on the Crobat, and he really needs a Zubat down. Because essentially, if he can hit a Zubat here... Oh, sorry, if he can hit the Crobat, he does 30 damage to the Jirachi, puts him on 50. He can then skill dive with the Crobat to put him on 80, but that's not quite going to be enough. He's also got the Muscle Band on the Crobat, so he'd actually be able to get the KO on that Jirachi with a Lysandre Energy Crobat. Crobat would put the Jirachi up to 50, and then the skill dive would do another 50 and get the KO, but it would need to be in the active to do so. Luke here, he's setting up another Mega Rayquaza, and he plays a VS Seeker for an N, because he needs to stop Benji essentially doing, well, anything. He needs to stop Benji playing as much as he possibly can, because here they're both going to win. I mean, essentially, Luke's going to win next turn if Benji doesn't win on his next turn. Now, there's no guarantee that Luke's going to win next turn, but I would imagine that he's going to. I'd be surprised if he didn't, put it that way. Benji here needs to get a KO, and it needs to involve a Lysandre. If he had a Zubat down, he'd go Zubat, Crobat, and then... Oh, no, of course, I'm talking about hitting the bench. He can't hit the bench. There's a Mr. Mime down. It is hidden under the Rayquaza, so it's easy to forget. Oh, and that's very interesting from Benji here. He doesn't even manage to get a Zubat down. So Luke here just needs a Lysandre. He trainers males, he draws a Lysandre, brings up the Shaman or the Landorus and gets the KO. And that second game is exactly how I would expect this matchup to go. Luke is at an advantage here because Benji has such a hard time KOing his Rayquazas. Benji almost has to ignore the Rayquazas and hit the bench Pokemon in order to get the KO. But of course, if Benji ignores the active Pokemon and goes after the bench Pokemon, then Luke has got a Rayquaza sitting there every single turn ready to get the KO. And that's going to be very, very difficult for Benji to be continually streaming bench KOs while Luke is just sitting there KOing whatever's in front of him every turn, and then occasionally hitting a Lysandre as well. So Benji is... I mean, I can see Benji winning the game. I see two routes for Benji winning the game. Number one is just the standard. He goes ahead and does what he did game one. And that's doable. The second option here is that Benji just goes ahead and, gets a load of bats out. And that's probably going to be the best plan here. He can go after the bench KOs. He can continue to go after the bench KOs. But it's going to be difficult. Now, if he can get the occasional bench KO combined with some bats here and there, and remember that bats go through Mr. Mime. And that's very, very, very important. Because Luke can't just hide behind Mr. Mime. Not with the Zubats. Although, it must be pointed out that Luke needs his Mr. Mime out here. Because if Benji can get a fast start with Landorus, etc., whilst at the same time getting all of his bats out, that's going to be very, very difficult for Luke to compete against. It's going to be very difficult indeed. So, Benji here, he has chosen to go first, and he's had to dump a Crobat, which sucks. But one reason why Benji wants to go first is those Zubats. It's lovely for Benji to go second, especially with the Hawlucha, and we've already seen the damage that Hawlucha can do, how quickly he can actually do that damage. It's very, very quick indeed. But if he goes second, he runs the risk of not getting his Zubats out. And we've seen him go second twice, and we have actually seen him struggle to get his Zubats and his Crobats and his Golbats both games here. It's taken a while, to be honest with you. It's not been a quick and easy route. So what he really needs to do here is just try and get set up. So he plays a Korrina here. So he's used a Jirachi, he's gone for a Korrina, he's gone for a Hawlucha, and I was going to say I wouldn't be surprised to see him go for an Ultra Ball. It turns out he's gone for a Repeat Ball, but for the same thing, he's doing it to get a Shaman so that he can draw more cards. And weirdly, I think that Korrina has actually gotten a much stronger card since the release of Shaman. Because now, whereas before you could Korrina for a Pokemon and an interesting tool, but then you ended up in an awkward position in that you then you weren't advancing your board state very well. Now, you can go for a ball to get a Shaman and you're good. Now, Luke has got an opportunity here. By the way, should be pointing out that Benji's got a Focus Sash on the Hawlucha and he's got a Zubat down. But Luke here has got a Shaman of Benji's in the active. And that is huge. Luke right now is going to be thinking, this needs to be the game where I get the turn 1 Rayquaza. So he's got the Spirit Link, he's got the DCE, he needs a Mega Turbo, and he plays a Battle Compressor there, so if he hasn't got an energy in the discard, he's going to be able to get one in the discard. He's then going to be able to, hopefully, he needs a Mega Turbo, and he needs a Mega Rayquaza. That's key here. Now, it must also be pointed out that with Shaman having 120 HP, Luke is going to need 4 benched Pokemon. If he can get 4 benched Pokemon, he is then going to get the KO. He's going to be 2 prizes up, and we have already seen the difficulty that Benji has trying to KO those Mega Rayquazas. And if Luke can get a Mega Rayquaza going on turn 1 and go 2 prizes up, it's going to be extremely difficult for Benji to come back from that. Not impossible. Not impossible by any stretch of the imagination. He can come back from this. It is possible for him to salvage this game. But it's going to take a lot for him to do so. And he's going to need Luke to get quite unlucky. He's going to need to draw a whole bunch of bats. And that is a very difficult thing to do when your opponent is taking prizes turn after turn. However, it looks like Benji has managed to catch a little bit of a break there. Luke has had to just switch back into his benched Rayquaza, and now Benji desperately needs to get that Shaman out of the active. Now, one option for Benji is, I don't think he plays DCE actually. If Benji played DCE, he can actually Sky Return the Shaman here, do 30 damage, KO the Execute, and then that means he doesn't have to KO 3 EXs. He can KO, say, the Mr. Mime and 2 EXs. But it's going to be difficult. Well, I mean, it's going to be impossible if he doesn't play DCE. But there comes a Lysandre. So Benji basically here is going, I am going to just take down this Rayquaza. I'm going to do whatever it takes. The Shaman then gets manually retreated. The Hawlucha goes up, currently hitting for 80. Remember, he goes through the resistance. Golbat comes down, so that's going to be 100 in total. And that is going to be, that's a good start. Now, he's got the Focus Sash there, so Luke is going to be, and he's got the energy, so he can get attacking, assuming he's got the Mega. Actually, he can get attacking without the Mega, I suppose, but he needs the extra HP from the Mega. Now, Luke here is in a precarious position, shall we say. He could end up very, very quickly. This whole game could switch in a matter of minutes. Because if Benji turns around and KOs that Rayquaza next turn and Luke doesn't have anything else going, then Benji's in basically perfect mode. And everything he wants to happen will be happening. Because if he can take down that Rayquaza, then now Luke is down 2 prizes. And Luke's got nothing going. And then Benji can start Lysandring Shamans and all of that. I mean, if Benji can keep his Hawluchas out for a couple of turns, he's going to be in a very good position. And you'll notice here that he's constantly going for the Focus Sash on Hawlucha. And as he should be. Because we've seen if Hawlucha can get 2 hits on something, it's usually going to kill it. Assuming it's an EX, of course. So Luke here, he's still digging. He hasn't yet been able to find that Mega. And he needs to find the Mega. If he doesn't find the Mega, he's going to find himself in trouble quite quickly. If he doesn't find the Mega, he can still get the KO. Oh, and there is the Megaphone. And now he's rolling. And he gets the Mega. Now Luke is going. And then again, as we see, this matchup, it's in Luke's favor, but it can switch very, very quickly. Luke now has got the Megaphone. He's got the KO on the Hawlucha. He's now a prize up. And Benji has lost all of his energy that was on the field. Now Benji's going to need another Hawlucha. And he's going to need a Muscle Band. He's going to need a Focus Sash. But that, of course, brings an interesting dynamic here. Because there is a possibility here. Remember that Rayquaza got 120 HP left and Luke has no more energy on the field. There's a possibility here that Benji can go Hawlucha, Strong Energy, Muscle Band, Fighting Stadium, and do 120 and KO the Rayquaza. And the Corinna here, it's got to be for a Hawlucha and a Muscle Band, or Hawlucha and something to reuse a Shaman or get a new Shaman or draw some more cards. Now, the other thing, of course, is if he can get a Crobat, then that's going to bring down the amount he needs to KO that Rayquaza. And there goes a Hawlucha, like I said. And I believe Benji plays for Hawlucha. He certainly should be. The best of these fighting bats lists do tend to play, a full complement of Hawlucha. Because it's crazy good. It's a basic Pokemon with free retreat, which has got a nice ability, does 60 damage for 1 energy, and can then be boosted with Strong Energy and Fighting Stadium and Muscle Band. It's really, really good. Now, Benji's spending an awful lot of time looking at his deck here, which makes me think he doesn't have the KO. And he's gone Super Scoop Up, and I thought that might be the only thing he could do, because it seems like he plays 2 Shaman. We haven't seen him play more than 2. So he can't get a 3rd Shaman out, so he's got to go Super Scoop Up. Now, if he hits Tails on Super Scoop Up here, this is going to be absolutely huge for Benji, Because if he hits heads on Super Scoop Up, he might well get the KO here. And, it's come up as a tails. That is absolutely heartbreaking. And then that swings the game right back round to Luke. If Benji could have got the KO with a Hawlucha here, that would have been absolutely huge. Now he's only going to be able to do 80 damage. And that's crucial because that's going to leave the Rayquaza with 40 HP left. And there's no Zubat down. Now, if there was a Zubat down, or the Rayquaza had 30 or less HP, then Benji would have just been able to go Crobat for the KO, and I've still got an attack. Luke here is going to be able to KO the Hawlucha, go 2 prizes up, and put himself in a position where, he can now just start building up a second Rayquaza. Why not? He can afford to lose that Rayquaza. Because he's going to be 2 prizes up. He's going to have done a huge amount of damage to Benji's side of the field, taking out a couple of strong energy, couple of Hawluchas, and he's going to have a second Rayquaza ready to go. And that is going to be devastating to Benji. Now, Luke could retreat and try and get a fresh Rayquaza going here. I honestly don't think it's needed. If I were Luke, I would be tempted to just leave that Rayquaza active, get the KO, and just start building up spare Rayquazas on the bench. Because the other thing is, if Luke puts it on the bench, then Benji's going to then try and kill it with a couple of bat drops. Whereas if he leaves it active, Benji's going to have to KO it with an attack, meaning that he's not getting a cheeky extra prize. Because let's say, for instance, Benji gets a Crobat next turn and a Zubat, and then a Golbat the turn after. Between those 2 drops, he's actually, over the next 2 turns, going to be able to kill the Mega Rayquaza on the bench while hitting a new one in the active. So if I were Luke here, I'd just leave that Rayquaza up, try and get some energy on one of the bench Rayquazas, and there goes a Skylar. I don't know what he's going to go for here. I would imagine either a Spirit Link or something to get an energy. Because he really, at this stage, needs the energy. But I could see him getting a Spirit Link to try and evolve one of those bench Rayquazas. Especially if he hasn't got a Professor's Letter or something he can use to get energy. Or indeed if he's played an energy this turn, which I don't believe he has. So he did go for the Spirit Link there, which does make the most sense. And he's going for an Ultra Ball. Now I think he's got 7 bench Pokemon. He's got 3 Shaman. Yeah, he's got 7 in total. 3 Shaman, 1 Mime, 1 Execute, 2 Rayquaza. Although he's just going for the Mega there, and he allows him to evolve. Remember, the Delta Revolution allows you to evolve straight away, and the Spirit Link tool, which is attached to it, means that you don't end your turn when you do evolve. So Luke heading into the driver's seat here, but it would have been nice for him to get an energy that turn. That would have been good. Now, and it looks like Benji's just hit something he would quite have liked last turn. I didn't see exactly what that was. Now, the other option for Benji here is just to evolve into Crobat and then use an energy to skill dive with the Crobat to KO the Rayquaza, forcing Luke to do something next turn. So he's gone for another Pokemon with the Ultra Ball, and he's already got a Jirachi and 2 Shaman on the bench, so I don't know what he's going to go for here. I mean, he'd go for he's just discarded Landorus, so he's not going to go for one of them. I could see him going for a Hawlucha, but then he clearly doesn't have any energy in hand. When you empty your hand like this for a Pokemon, Jirachi and Shaman are the 2 you want to go for. They're always the 2. So I don't know exactly what he's going to be wanting to do here. Now, he's gone for the Hawlucha, but I don't know exactly what he's going to be able to do here in terms of trying to get something going with it. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what he's actually able to do here. Oh, nothing. He's just passed. Okay, then. So Luke's going to get another KO. That Rayquaza is currently hitting for, I think, 210 HP. So it really doesn't bode very well for Luke here. Sorry, for Benji. Luke's just going to get an easy KO. Oh, and Lysandre comes down, which means that one Mega Rayquaza has now actually taken 4 prizes. And Benji really doesn't have very much going on here. I don't think he can win this game. And he's just scooped straight away. Nothing he can do. Unfortunately, that's the way it goes. So a good game there. Thank you very much to those two chaps for being on stream. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, all of that good stuff. If you've already subscribed to PTCGRadio, get a friend to subscribe. And please check out my new video game channel, Wossy Plays, WOSSYPLAYS. Easily found on YouTube or as a featured channel subscription of PTCG Radio. So thank you very much for watching, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll be back with round 4 very shortly indeed.